Hi everyone, it's Victoria at Bolst Global and I hope you're doing really well. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to export to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Whether you're a seasoned exporter to the UAE already or completely new to the market, this video will give you the essential information in order to get your product successfully into the UAE. The UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, is a great place to do business and can be a great initial step into entering the wider Gulf region. It has a very diverse population of over 10 million people, 90% of which are expats from around the world who are living and working in the UAE. As a market, it is also very reliant on importation of goods, with usually around 90% of all the products that you find in the market having been imported from outside the UAE. This makes it an attractive marketplace for brands to expand their reach and to export to. In recent years, the UAE government has put in place a number of initiatives to help drive health and wellness initiatives and improve the well-being of the UAE citizens. As such, for brands operating within this health and wellness space, this provides a number of opportunities that are available in order to enter the marketplace and come into the UAE. So to round up, the UAE is a great place to do business. Why? It has a growing population and a diverse one at that. It's heavily reliant on importation of products. The government has health and wellness initiatives in place, and there is a real consumer appetite to try new products and brands that enter that space and see what they're all about. This makes it a great destination for brands and manufacturers who are looking to expand their reach. Key steps involved in the export process. Market research. It's really important when you start out looking at a new export market to really understand the intricacies of that marketplace and if it is the right fit for your brand and the proposition that you're offering. Now, it may be that this needs adapting, but the only way you're going to know this is by getting into the market itself and finding out and investigating some of the key areas to see that potential compatibility. So, for example, obviously undertaking competitor analysis is really important, seeing what is already available in the marketplace, that even if your product is truly unique, there will still be some form of indirect competition that consumers will assimilate your product to when evaluating your product versus another one that would be available to them. So it's really important to understand where your competition lies, what type of product it is, its country of origin, and its value proposition to the consumers in the export market. Understanding that is really important because otherwise it can be very difficult to find the right route to market that's appropriate and to find the right consumers if you're pitching this in the wrong way. As well as competitor analysis and seeing what is available and where your products would compete with others, it's also really important to see what the market trends are and seeing what's happening in the marketplace. Are there some initiatives happening at governmental level that could impact the opportunity? One of the things that springs straight to mind for the UAE, for example, is whilst soft beverages is a real growing area, there is a real problem often in trying to navigate some of the excise taxes that exist on beverages. Therefore, carbonate taxes, sugar taxes, etc. Even if your products do not contain sugar, you could still quite easily become subject to that excise tax, and hence increasing your shelf pricing that would be required in order to pay for those taxes. And that can sometimes make your product from a pricing perspective and from a value chain perspective unattainable. So it's things like that that you really do need to consider, alongside also the compliance aspect and making sure that your products could even be registered in the first place. These are some of the fundamentals that are part of the market research process, and it's really important to get out to market in one way or another. That can be obviously yourselves going out there, taking on that cost and investment and having a look at the marketplace and trying to find the right stakeholders to talk to in the market. Another alternative is to go out at certain times of the year when trade shows, for example, are happening and there's a hive of activity. But again, there's also usually quite heavy costs involved with that and commitment from your side. Other alternatives are to find local partners in place who would be potentially interested and work with them through some of that market research process, or work with people like ourselves at Bolst Global who effectively can help navigate and accelerate that process through our methodologies and our expertise in the UAE. Coming out for trade shows like Gulf Food for the food sector, Arab Health for the supplement and nutraceutical side can be a great way of gaining some insights, as I mentioned previously. However, do be aware that at those times of the year when there's such a hive of activity, it does mean that usually there is much more cost involved in coming out to market over those periods of time, both from a flight perspective, expenses, hotels do creep up quite significantly in cost as well. So it's all those factors to bear in mind and weighing up the return on investment and the costs that would be involved upfront in order to get that critical market research undertaken. So to round up, the market research stage of internationalisation is really important, and it's often a place where a lot of brands like to skip through and just get to the sales. However, doing this right and laying the foundations by understanding the competitor analysis that you've undertaken, the value chain, the value proposition that you have as well in terms of will what you're offering work for the consumers in your target market, coming out to market and understanding the right timings and investing in that and understanding the costs that involved is all really important in order to have that first successful step in being able to enter a new export market. Route to market. This is a really important area to also get right when you're looking to enter a new marketplace. And deciding which way to go, whether that's through direct channels or indirect channels, such as finding a local partner as a distributing partner or an agent, for example, is really critical to ensure your long-term success. And it's really worth thinking ahead of time how that could look and what would be the best fit for your brand and business and the capability and resources and financial commitment that you can put into exporting into the marketplace at the moment and in the future. We see a lot of companies who find opportunistic sales within the UAE and go for that without considering the longer term implication of that route to market, and usually often as well the value chain that may be involved with that, or re-engineering it in the future if they then want to include other people and other partners for distribution in the longer term. We have done a webinar on behalf of Free From Dubai recently with regards to selling to different types of distribution partners. So do take a look at that webinar for much more detail on this aspect of internationalisation. Negotiating a deal. So once you've carried out your market research, you've decided on your route to market, and you've managed to get some great interest from a local partner in the UAE, then it's the time to get down to the nitty-gritty and agree a deal and move forward with a first order. This is a huge topic in itself and lots of ways in which this can play out. However, from our experience, here are some of the top key areas, top three I would say, to take into consideration when you're negotiating a deal, particularly in the UAE and in general the wider Arab world. Firstly, it's really important to get your commercials right. That goes back to your market research and understanding the competitor set that's out in the marketplace already and where your product fits in and the value proposition that you're offering with relation to that, which then mandates what the pricing should be, not only in terms of the retail shelf price, but then you also need to work through your route to market that you've chosen. So if you are working through a local partner rather than going direct to retail, for example, you need to make sure the margin requirements that are needed for the distributing partner plus the retailer will stack up and arrive at a shelf price that is also acceptable to the consumer. So making sure that your pricing is set out is important. Now, when you give your pricing to your, say, local partner, for example, it's also important to be really clear what that price does and does not include. So, for example, as we will see, the need to have Arabic labels on products, whether stickered or printed directly, is required for food and drink products. So usually for customers who do not have brands and manufacturers who do not have Arabic directly on their products already, there is the on cost to consider of that to consider that, particularly if you're having to do that at source before you export your products. Also, the documentation requirements, there are usually costs involved with every consignment to produce those documents. So again, that's another factor to bear in mind when it comes to your overall margin. Plus as well, remembering that depending on your route to market, there may be listing fees, marketing investment that is also required to get your brand into the marketplace and penetrated with activations and creating brand awareness, all of which requires more financial commitment too. So all of this needs to be bear in mind when considering on your pricing terms that you're offering. A final one also to throw into the mix there is your Incoterms and what you're selling on. Again, are you involved with any of the logistics part, either within your domestic market or into the UAE, for example, which obviously has a much higher cost in order to deliver those goods in, are you insuring those goods, etc., etc. So lots to consider there when it comes to pricing when negotiating your deal. Another aspect as well when it comes to the UAE and being a particularly small market is the subject of exclusivity. And a lot of partners will ask for that, at least for initial period. And it's fair to say that from our experience, this is usually the best way to go, to give those partners who are interested in your brand and building your brand in the UAE the necessary time to get retailer listings, to find new customers, and to bring the brand in and start developing that brand awareness. These things do take time. It is a small market, and therefore being able to work together with them and provide that comfort of exclusivity to go off and do what they do best within the UAE is something that you should be willing to offer, at least for initial period when working in this marketplace. A final area that's worth considering when it comes to negotiating a deal is whether there is a need to put a formal contractual agreement in place between you and your distribution partner. It's fair to say that in this part of the world, it's all about relationships and building that trust and transparency. As such, we've seen from our experience businesses doing great business in the UAE with local partners and without even having a contractual agreement officially in place. How has this worked? Well, they've spent the time investing in the relationship with their partners in the UAE and having that mutual understanding of how they're working and obviously overcoming any challenges and really kind of optimizing any opportunities they see in the marketplace together and really supporting each other to make this an overall success for both parties. Therefore, it's worth considering what's important to you as a brand owner when entering the UAE and the type of arrangement which you're comfortable working with as well, and bearing in mind that that relationship building aspect is really critical for the long-term success of your brand. Product registration and compliance. This is often an area that a lot of businesses and brand owners get stuck with, and rightly so, because it is a very complex area. The standards and the registration processes do change quite regularly within the UAE, and so it's important to keep abreast of this and to ensure that your products are correctly registered in order to be able to import them into the marketplace. When it comes to registration, there has to be a local UAE entity who does the registration through the online portals. Usually that is for municipality when it is food-based products. For some of the supplement and nutraceutical products, there are different routes for registration, and we're seeing more and more a push towards the Ministry of Health type registrations, which is more stringent and requires more documentation and takes a longer period of time. Again, when it comes to how long for registration, it really does depend. We've seen it with clients where things happen very quickly and others where it's become much more complex. And even with the same product, but just different flavorings, for example, we've had no issue with one product on registration and numerous issues and amends and claims that are needing to be verified on another. So unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. And often as well, choosing who to work with and how to work within the marketplace when it comes to your distribution partners and registration partners is also critical as to how successful and how quickly that process may happen. However, it is important to note that compliance is a real important issue and one to take seriously when you are looking to export your products into the UAE. Usually to register your products, it's normally quite straightforward. There's front of pack images, flat artwork files, and the Arabic translation, which for food items is a mandatory requirement for the UAE. For other categories, less so compliance on Arabic labelling, but things such as date coding, which is usually different from, say, the UK way of best before, must be adhered to also and be clearly printed on packs too. There's also a number of other compliance for registration aspects, such as including country of origin on all packs, again something which some countries do not mandate, but having English and Arabic is the bare minimum, and a number of other key aspects when it comes to compliance must be adhered to. Be mindful also that with your packaging, any claims that you make on the pack may be either contested or you will need to verify them. So things such as claiming products as gluten-free. If a product is organic, then clearly the organic certification is needed to be required to be proven. Also, there is a number of complexities around the halal certification, and if your products do contain any products that would require then halal certificates to prove that the product can be imported, then that also needs to be considered. You need to make sure that you have the relevant halal certifications relative to your product category that are recognised by the UAE authorities. So to summarise, compliance is really important in order to make sure you can export your product to the UAE. You need to adhere to the UAE rules and guidelines, and you must have your product successfully registered and approved for importation before you can ship any of those goods. Remember also that any claims and additional documentation for the compliance must be sent in, adhered to, and kept up to date in order to make sure that continuity of supply once you start exporting to the UAE. Necessary documentation. So once you've gone through registering your products, you've established a route to market, you've negotiated your commercial terms, and you're now in the process of getting your products ready to ship, we then have to look at the export documentation that is required to accompany every consignment in order to be imported and clear customs in the UAE. There are a number of necessary and critical documents, the first one of which is your commercial invoice. That must detail the products with the right commodity codes for customs and duties purposes, and detail all the shipment plus the Incoterms on which you are selling the goods to your customer in the UAE. This is important with Incoterms to make sure that you're choosing the correct ones and that then ascertain the right level of risk, cost, responsibility, which you are sharing between yourself and your buyer, basically. So commercial invoice is a critical one. Packing list is another one. Again, this just gives full details of what is inside your consignment, the exact number of packages, units, etc. So that it's very clear what your consignment contains and how much of it is there as well. Again, getting the weights and dimensions on your packing list is really important, and making sure that they are accurate is also critical, because depending on the mode of transport, but particularly with something like air freight, if your weights and dims are out of the scope of what's on your packing list, when it comes to your airway bill that accompanies it, you can find yourself, if you're particularly paying for the transport, a real discrepancy in cost and much more heavier costs to pay when it comes to shipping the goods. Another critical document is usually the certificate of origin, which is issued by your local Chamber of Commerce. And that again is stating the origin of the products, which again helps from a duties and taxes perspective, and sometimes providing certain reliefs in certain instances. It's important with this again to detail the mode of transport and the full description of the goods, and to be truly consistent about where the products are being manufactured from in the purposes of internationalisation. A health certificate is another requirement, and one that often trips a lot of people up, because there are lots of different types of health certificates that can be used. If your products contain dairy and meat origin ingredients, or the products are of dairy or meat, then usually as well within that, the type of export health certificate that's required is one of a veterinary status, where the vets will come and actually look at the consignments and sign them off with a different type of certificate. There's then the other option of getting a more standard health certificate, either from your local council, or you can also, in some instances, apply to the Rural Payments Agency for another type of health certificate too, if you're a UK exporter. Aside from those 4 documents, if your products are there for organic or they are requiring halal certifications, those also need to be accompanying the shipment with each consignment to prove that status of the goods as well, and that they are permissible to enter the UAE. These tend to be the core documents, and if you require any support on the commercial invoice side of things, we do have a tutorial on our Bolst Global website where you can get much more detail around everything that needs to be required on that type of document. And as I said, it's an important one to get right. The final thing I would say is that obviously with the documents, you will require the transport documentation also. So if it's going through air freight, that would be an airway bill. And if it's going through sea freight, that would be a bill of lading. Now, these documents are also required in order to release the goods at customs. And usually as well, hard copies of all of these documents do need to be sent to the customer who is going to be clearing customs in the UAE for that purpose, as often soft copies and via email are not always sufficient. So be ready to also, once you've stamped and signed all the required documents, print off the hard copies and courier them across to your customer in order that they can clear customs as the goods arrive in a timely manner. Shipping and logistics. This is often another area that exporters can find tricky to navigate, especially in the early stages of setting up a route to market in the UAE. It's really important to start with that you understand who is responsible for the shipping, and that is usually as part of what's negotiated with your commercial terms. So if you're working off an Ex Works or an FCA or even an FOB type shipment, then usually the aspect of the transportation onwards and coming into the UAE would be the responsibility of your buyer. And that can make things a little bit easier for the first time exporters, although it does not negate the fact that you still will need to process the necessary export documentation for that consignment in order for your buyer to be able to clear the goods and take responsibility of it at their end. With the transport side of things, there's a number of considerations, and obviously timeframes and how long it will take to get your goods into the UAE from the point of departure is always a factor, particularly with products within the food and drink sector, which are perishable, and shelf life is always critical, particularly when in the UAE there usually needs to be a high percentage remaining shelf life of products when they enter the UAE in order to be able to have a necessary sell-through rate and not be left with an issue of having to liquidate stock because it's expiring. This is always critical to manage, and we do see some UAE importers preferring as a result to air freight goods into the UAE market despite their much higher costs of doing so, particularly also with first initial shipments to get the products in. So it is worth bearing in mind who is responsible for the shipment and deciding whether you as a brand owner are capable and able through your own networks, maybe of using freight forwarders in the past or having a good relationship with other logistics companies, that you're ready and able to take on some of that responsibility. Or if you aren't, making sure that the importer does have the necessary networks at their end to ensure that the products can arrive safely and timely in order to make sure that the products will do well when they arrive and are sold through at the right rate of sale and give a great performance for ongoing business and growing that business together. Another way that smaller brands may be able to operate in the marketplace is to work through consolidators who are supplying into, say, the retail channels, usually on a consignment basis where it's much smaller, but it's usually a domestic sale. You deliver your goods down to their consolidation point, and then they will do all the rest onwards, including the documentation and some of the Arabic labeling, which often other brand owners may have to take on responsibility if they're dealing elsewhere with other distribution partners or selling direct to retail sometimes too. Another consideration for your products and to bear in mind for transportation is the extremely high temperatures in the UAE and the wider Gulf region that are encountered particularly during the summer months, and making sure that your product, whilst it may be ambient and be able to not be subject to any temperature control in your domestic market, that may not be the case either when in transportation or when in storage in the UAE, for example. So be mindful of that and what that may then imply in terms of transportation needing to be temperature controlled, and then an extra cost factor and a little bit more complexity to manage as well should be taken into consideration when looking at your logistics and transportation options. As always, it's really important to make sure you find the right logistics partners and networks to work with. Great ones can help and also support you with documentation and understanding some of that needs to accompany the shipments as well. But ultimately, it's down to you to decide who will take responsibility for the transportation and the storage and onward shipment of the products. Fully appreciate that within this section there's a lot to take on board when it comes to transportation and logistics. However, in our opinion and from our expertise and experience, if you're a first-time exporter or new to this, it's preferable to try and take as much responsibility away from yourselves and onto the buyer as you possibly can in order to make sure that the transition of getting your goods into the UAE is as smooth and as positive an experience as possible. In which case, we would suggest that when it comes to your Incoterms, trying to negotiate on FCA or FOB terms would be preferable to take and ease some of that complexity from you. Sales and marketing. So you've finally got your product into the UAE and on the retailer shelves. Great news after all that time, effort and energy. However, now is the important bit to ensure that continuity and market penetration and ensure the long-term success of your brand in the UAE. This is where understanding what marketing efforts you will be investing in with your chosen partner or route to market is critical, and making sure that you're accounting for extra support, whether that's financial, whether that's resource-led from your team or through external providers, in order to make sure that there's a brand awareness for the UAE consumers of your products being in the market, there's a growing loyalty and an uptake of your products in the UAE. Within your sales and marketing efforts, it's really important to show commitment to your chosen partner in the UAE, and that could be under a number of guises. For example, you could provide in-depth product training, something we've done on behalf of clients before with large pharmacy retailers in the UAE. Also, potentially setting aside investment for local advertising, brand promotions or activations in store as well, and sitting with your distribution partner, if that's your route to market, to decide on the best and opportune times for that to happen. Investing in local digital marketing through their channels and expertise is another route, but making sure that you're investing time, resources and building that relationship with your chosen partner in the UAE ongoingly is really important. Of course, coming out to trade shows and being in market is really critical, but it shouldn't just be a once yearly opportunity. You do need to make sure that you have that regularity of communication, of face-to-face commitments, and showing that you're building the relationship in the right way and that you are committed to working and supporting the brand in the UAE for the ongoing foreseeable future. We hope you found this guide really useful. If you'd like any more information about how to export to the UAE, do get in touch with us. Likewise, you can sign up to our newsletter for plenty of tips and advice on the region. And you can also visit our website for a wealth of guides and resources. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you again soon.